7 years after ghosting my cheating wife, she's still hunting me down. From discovery to disappearance, my journey of healing and her relentless pursuit for reconciliation. It's been 7 years since I disappeared from my old life, and I thought I'd left everything behind. But the past has a way of catching up, no matter how far you run. I was 28 when I married Sarah. We'd been college sweethearts, and after 5 years of dating, it felt like the natural next step. The first 2 years of our marriage were blissful. We bought a small house in the suburbs, adopted a golden retriever named Max, and started talking about having kids. I thought I had it all figured out. Then came that fateful business trip to Chicago. I was supposed to be gone for a week, but a canceled meeting meant I could surprise Sarah by coming home 2 days early. In hindsight, I wish I'd just stayed in that hotel room. I still remember the excitement I felt as I quietly unlocked our front door, imagining Sarah's face when she saw me. But the house was eerily quiet. No TV, no music, not even Max's usual eager greeting. As I climbed the stairs, I heard muffled sounds coming from our bedroom. My heart started racing, but my mind refused to accept what was becoming increasingly obvious. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, and there they were. Sarah and my best friend Tom, tangled in our bed. The bed we'd saved up for months to buy. The bed where we'd planned our future together. They didn't notice me at first. I stood there frozen for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds. Then Sarah's eyes met mine, and time seemed to stop. The look of shock and guilt on her face is seared into my memory. What followed was a blur of shouting, crying, and desperate explanations. Sarah swore it was a one-time mistake, that she loved me and only me. Tom stammered apologies, saying he'd been drunk and it didn't mean anything. But as I looked at them, all I felt was a cold, numbing emptiness. I left the house that night, checking into a nearby hotel. Over the next few days, Sarah bombarded me with calls and texts, begging for forgiveness and a chance to explain. Tom tried to reach out too, but I blocked his number immediately. As the shock wore off, anger set in. But it wasn't the explosive, furniture-smashing kind of anger. It was a quiet, icy rage that settled deep in my bones. I realized I didn't want explanations or apologies. I didn't want to work things out or seek revenge. I just wanted to disappear. So that's exactly what I did. I had a week before I was expected back at work. In that time, I set my plan in motion. I withdrew as much cash as I could from our joint account, leaving just enough to avoid immediate suspicion. I reached out to a cousin in another state, swearing him to secrecy and asking for a temporary place to stay. I packed a single suitcase with essentials and mailed it to my cousin's address. The hardest part was saying goodbye to Max. I knew I couldn't take him with me, but leaving him behind broke my heart. I hope Sarah at least took good care of him. On the day I was supposed to return to work, I instead boarded a bus to my cousin's town. I left my car in long-term parking at the airport, my phone in a trash can, and my old life behind. The first few months were the hardest. I stayed with my cousin, working odd jobs for cash and trying to figure out my next move. Sarah's frantic messages and calls to my family gradually tapered off, though I heard through the grapevine that she'd filed a missing persons report. Eventually, I settled in a small town on the opposite coast, using my middle name and my mother's maiden name. I found work as a carpenter's apprentice, something I'd always been interested in but never pursued. Slowly but surely, I built a new life for myself. For 5 years, I lived in relative peace. I made new friends, dated casually, though I never let anyone get too close, and even started my own small woodworking business. I thought I'd successfully outrun my past. But 2 years ago, everything changed. I was at a local farmer's market when I spotted a familiar face in the crowd. It was Sarah's sister, Emily. My blood ran cold as I ducked behind a produce stand, praying she hadn't seen me. I left immediately, my heart pounding. That night, I scoured social media, something I rarely did, for any sign that Emily had recognized me. There was nothing, but the close call shook me to my core. I realized that no matter how careful I'd been, there was always a chance of being found. Over the next few months, I became paranoid. Every unfamiliar car on my street, every wrong number call, felt like a potential threat to the life I'd built. I considered moving again, but the thought of starting over was exhausting. Then, 6 months ago, I received a letter at my workshop. No return address, just my name, my new name, and the shop's address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten message. I know it's you. We need to talk. S. My world came crashing down around me. How had she found me? What did she want after all this time? And more importantly, what was I going to do now? I stared at that letter for hours, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to run again, to disappear even further this time. But another part, a part I thought I'd buried long ago, was curious. What could Sarah possibly have to say after all these years? Against my better judgment, I decided to stay put. If Sarah had found me once, she could probably do it again. At least here, I had some semblance of control over the situation. For weeks, I lived on edge, jumping at every sound and scrutinizing every unfamiliar face. But nothing happened. No more letters, no surprise visits. I started to wonder if the letter had been some cruel prank or if I'd imagined the whole thing. Then, 2 months after the letter arrived, I saw her. I was leaving my workshop late one evening when I spotted a figure standing under a streetlight across the road. Even from a distance, I'd know that silhouette anywhere. Sarah. Our eyes met, and for a moment it was like being transported back to that bedroom 7 years ago. The same shock, the same confusion, the same flood of emotions I'd worked so hard to suppress. Sarah took a step forward, and I instinctively took one back. She stopped, raising her hands as if to show she meant no harm. "Please," she called out, her voice cracking, "can we talk?" I don't know what made me agree. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was a desire for closure, or maybe 7 years of running had just left me too tired to flee again. Whatever the reason, I found myself nodding. We walked to a nearby park in silence, the tension between us almost palpable. Finally, we sat on a bench, a careful distance apart. Sarah spoke first. "I've imagined this moment so many times," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But now that I'm here, I don't know where to begin." I said nothing, waiting. I'd waited 7 years, I could wait a few more minutes. She took a deep breath. "I'm sorry. I know those words probably mean nothing to you now, but I need you to know how deeply, truly sorry I am. What I did, there's no excuse. I destroyed everything we had, everything we could have been." I felt a familiar anger rising in my chest. "Why now?" I asked, my voice rougher than I'd intended. "Why track me down after all this time?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Because I never stopped loving you. Because not a day has gone by that I haven't regretted what I did. Because I've spent 7 years trying to make amends, hoping that someday I'd get the chance to tell you how sorry I am." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Make amends? By hunting me down? By disrupting the life I've built?" She flinched at my words but pressed on. "I know it sounds crazy, but when you disappeared, God, I was so worried. I thought something terrible had happened to you. It took me months to realize that you'd left by choice, that you'd left because of what I'd done." "How did you find me?" I asked, ignoring her explanation. Sarah hesitated. It wasn't easy. I hired a private investigator a few years ago. He found traces of you in different cities, but by the time I'd get there, you'd be gone. Then last year, he got a lead here. I've been in town for months trying to work up the courage to contact you." The idea that she'd been in my town for months, watching me, made my skin crawl. "What do you want from me, Sarah? Forgiveness? A second chance? Because I don't think I have either of those to give." She shook her head. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I needed you to know how sorry I am, how much I regret what I did, and I needed to know that you're okay." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of 7 years hanging between us. Finally, I spoke. "I'm not the same person I was back then, Sarah. That man, your husband, he's gone. He disappeared the moment he walked into that bedroom." Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know, I can see that. You seem stronger, more confident. I'm glad you've built a good life for yourself. You deserve that." "What about you?" I found myself asking, surprised by my own curiosity. "What have you been doing all these years?" She gave a sad smile. "Trying to be a better person. I've been in therapy, working through my issues. I divorced Tom a year after you left. That was a mistake from the start. I focused on my career, on being there for my family. But there's always been this hole in my life, this constant reminder of the biggest mistake I ever made. I didn't know how to respond to that. Part of me felt a vindictive satisfaction in knowing she'd suffered, but another part, a part I wasn't entirely comfortable with, felt a twinge of sympathy. "Listen," Sarah said, her voice taking on a pleading tone. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but is there any chance we could, I don't know, stay in touch? Maybe try to build some kind of friendship?" I stared at her incredulously. "Friendship? Sarah, you upended my entire life. I had to leave everything behind because of what you did. How could we possibly be friends?" She nodded, looking dejected but not surprised. "I understand. I had to ask. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't at least try." As I looked at her, I was struck by how different she seemed from the woman I'd married. There was a sadness in her eyes, a weariness that hadn't been there before. For the first time, I allowed myself to really think about what these 7 years must have been like for her. I can't offer you friendship, Sarah," I said slowly. "Too much has happened. But I can offer you forgiveness." Her head snapped up, eyes wide with disbelief. "What?" I took a deep breath. "I forgive you, not for your sake, but for mine. Carrying this anger, this bitterness, it's exhausting. I want to let it go." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes again, but this time there was a glimmer of something else. Relief, maybe, or gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what that means to me." We sat there for a while longer, the silence between us no longer as tense as before. As the sun began to set, I stood up. "I should go," I said. Sarah nodded, standing as well. "Of course. Thank you for talking with me, for listening." I turned to leave, then paused. "Sarah," she looked at me expectantly, "please don't contact me again. I've built a life here, a good life. I'd like to keep it that way." She nodded, a mix of understanding and sorrow on her face. "I won't, I promise. Take care of yourself." As I walked away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The anger I'd carried for so long began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I knew this wasn't the end. Sarah's reappearance had stirred up old memories and emotions that would take time to process. But for the first time in 7 years, I felt truly free. Free from the past, free from the anger, free to fully embrace the life I'd built for myself. As I reached the edge of the park, I turned back for one last look. Sarah was still standing there, watching me go. I raised my hand in a small wave, a final goodbye to the life I'd left behind. Then I turned and walked into the future, ready to face whatever came next. In the days following my encounter with Sarah, I found myself in a state of emotional turmoil. The carefully constructed walls I'd built around my past began to crumble, and memories I'd long suppressed came flooding back. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake, replaying our conversation in the park, wondering if I'd made the right decision in forgiving her. A week after our meeting, I received another letter at my workshop. My heart raced as I recognized Sarah's handwriting, but I forced myself to open it. Inside was a single page. "Thank you for hearing me out. As promised, this is the last you'll hear from me. I've included my therapist's contact information if you ever feel the need to talk to someone about what happened. I truly hope you find peace and happiness. Goodbye." True to her word, that was the last direct contact I had with Sarah. But her brief reappearance in my life had set off a chain reaction I couldn't ignore. I found myself opening up to friends about my past for the first time. Their support and understanding helped me realize how much I'd been holding back, not just about Sarah, but in all my relationships. I'd been so focused on protecting myself that I'd missed out on genuine connections. Inspired by Sarah's suggestion, I started seeing a therapist. It wasn't easy at first, dredging up old wounds, confronting the pain and anger I'd buried. But slowly I began to heal. I learned to forgive not just Sarah, but myself as well. I'd been carrying so much guilt for running away, for cutting off my family and friends without explanation. Through therapy, I started to understand that while disappearing might not have been the healthiest choice, it was the only way I knew to protect myself at the time. As I worked through my issues, I felt a growing desire to reconnect with my past. With my therapist's encouragement, I reached out to my parents. The phone call was emotional, to say the least. They'd spent years wondering if I was dead or alive, and hearing my voice again brought them to tears. We talked for hours, and though there was hurt and confusion on both sides, there was also love and relief. Reconnecting with my family opened a door I thought I'd closed forever. Over the next few months, I cautiously reestablished contact with old friends and relatives. Some were angry at first, others just grateful to know I was okay. It wasn't always easy, but each conversation helped me feel more whole, more like myself. As I embraced my past, I also found myself more open to the future. I started dating again, this time allowing myself to be vulnerable and honest about my history. It was terrifying at first, but also liberating. I met Anna, a kind and patient woman who didn't run when I told her about my past. Instead, she held my hand and thanked me for trusting her. Our relationship grew slowly but steadily, built on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. A year after my encounter with Sarah, I made a decision that once would have seemed impossible. I moved back to my hometown. Not to reclaim my old life, but to build a bridge between who I was and who I'd become. I kept my woodworking business, commuting to my workshop in the next town over, but I was finally ready to stop running. The move wasn't without its challenges. The first time I ran into Tom at the grocery store, my heart nearly stopped. But instead of anger I expected to feel, I found I pitied him. He looked older than his years, worn down by guilt and regret. We nodded to each other and went our separate ways, and I realized that encounter no longer had the power to shake me. I never saw Sarah again, but I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd moved to another state, started a new career helping troubled teens. Part of me hoped she'd found some measure of peace, just as I had. As for me, life settled into a new normal. I married Anna in a small ceremony, surrounded by both old friends and new. My parents walked me down the aisle, tears of joy in their eyes. Looking out at the gathering, I saw the tapestry of my life. The pain and the healing, the loss and the recovery, all woven together to create something beautiful and strong. Now, as I sit here writing this, I realize that disappearing was never about escaping my past. It was about finding myself, about becoming the person I needed to be. The journey was long and often painful, but I wouldn't change it. Every step, every hardship led me here. To those who might be in a similar situation, contemplating disappearing or running from pain, I offered this advice. Face it. It's terrifying, it's excruciating, but it's the only way to truly heal. Running might feel like freedom, but it's a cage of its own making. True freedom comes from confronting your pain, forgiving both others and yourself, and allowing yourself to be vulnerable again. I'm not the same man who walked in on his wife's infidelity all those years ago. I'm not the same man who disappeared without a trace. I'm someone new, someone stronger, someone who finally understands that it's our scars that make us who we are.